You know, we put an incredible amount of trust in our doctors. But what happens if their professional judgment, even if it's backed by their peers, is just wrong? Could a judge, someone with zero medical training, actually step in and overrule them? Well, today we're going to dive into the tragic case that forced the entire legal system to answer that exact question. So let's start with the central puzzle right here. For decades, the answer to this question was pretty much a solid no. I mean, if a doctor could find a respectable group of other doctors who would have done the same thing, they were basically in the clear. But that raises a huge question, right? What if that common practice, that shared professional opinion, just doesn't hold up to logical scrutiny? All right, here's our game plan. We're going to start with the old rule, the one that gave doctors this really powerful defense. Then we'll get into the heartbreaking case that put it all to the test, and the clash of experts that followed. After that, we'll look at the groundbreaking new question the court started asking. And finally, we'll wrap up with why this whole thing is still so incredibly important for all of us today. Okay, so before we can really get into the case that changed everything, we've got to understand the legal shield, and it was a powerful one that doctors had in their corner for almost 50 years. It was called the BOLM test, and honestly, it was a really big deal. What it meant, in practice, was that the medical profession kind of got to police itself. As long as a doctor could prove that some respected doctors would have done the exact same thing, it was almost impossible for a court to find them negligent. It didn't even matter if other experts thought it was completely the wrong call. But then, in the late 1990s, a truly heartbreaking case came along that put the entire BOLM test right under the microscope. And it all centered around a little boy named Patrick Bolitho. The story is just tragic, and the facts are pretty straightforward. Patrick was only 2 years old, and he was in the hospital for breathing problems. At one point, he had 2 really severe episodes where he couldn't breathe properly. The nurse on duty called for the senior doctor both times. The doctor never showed up, and after that second episode, Patrick went into cardiac arrest, which left him with severe brain damage. Now, you're probably thinking, well, that's an open and shut case, right? The doctor didn't come when they were called. But legally, it got way more complicated. The whole thing turned into a debate about what if. And this is where things get really tricky. Patrick's family argued that if the doctor had shown up, she would have intubated him, put a breathing tube in, and this whole tragedy could have been avoided. But the doctor's defense team came back with their own experts, and they argued that no, even if she had come to the bedside, the accepted practice at the time meant she wouldn't have intubated him anyway. See what they did there? They were using the BOLM test as their shield. So this put the court in a really tight spot. I mean, if the BOLM test is the be-all and end-all, then the case is pretty much over, right? As long as the defense experts sound credible, the court's hands are tied. They just have to accept it. But is that really fair? This case was so important, it went all the way to the House of Lords, which was the UK's highest court back then. And their judgment? Well, it introduced a small but absolutely profound new twist to the law. They essentially hit the pause button. They said, hold on a minute, while what other doctors think is obviously hugely important, it can't be the only thing that matters. The court has to be more than just a rubber stamp for expert opinions. The judge, Lord Brown Wilkinson, said it plain as day. The court isn't bound to let a doctor off the hook just because they found some experts to back them up. So that get-out-of-jail-free card of finding a few colleagues to agree with you, it wasn't going to work anymore. The court now had the power to actually dig into the substance of that opinion. And this, right here, was the real game changer. It wasn't enough anymore for a medical opinion to just exist and be held by respected doctors. That opinion now had to be logical. For the first time, the court could ask the big question, okay, but does this practice actually make any sense? So this led to a new 2-step process. Step 1 is still the old BOLM test. Did the doctor's actions have support from a responsible group of medical professionals? But now there's step 2, which people call the BOLM gloss. The court has to ask, can that professional opinion actually stand up to logical analysis? And if the answer is no, if the risks of that practice just clearly outweigh the benefits for no good reason, then the court can find the doctor negligent, no matter how many other experts agree with them. This wasn't just some dusty legal tweak. It had, and it absolutely continues to have, a massive real-world impact on the relationship between all of us, our doctors, and the law. When you boil it down, the legacy of Bolitho is all about balance. For patients, it's a critical protection. It means that's just how we do things can't be used to defend a practice that's just plain illogical. For doctors, it's a push for greater accountability, A reminder that you can't just follow the crowd. You have to be able to justify why you're doing what you're doing. That old Boehm test shield was finally cracked, letting a little bit of logical scrutiny shine through. And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. The Bolitho case was a huge moment, right? It ever so slightly shifted the balance of power from total professional deference toward judicial oversight. It really forces us to keep asking a tough question. In a world that's getting more and more specialized, how do we make sure that expertise always serves reason and not just tradition?